Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel, and joined today our esteemed guest, one Mr. Tanner Dykstra. He is here with us today to talk about our first impressions of Deathloop. But before we do that, if you want to tell us what you think of Deathloop or anything else at all, join our Discord as usual. Link top of the description or down there. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. All the plugs are out of the way. The three of us have been waiting for Deathloop for a very long time, ever since its
Yes.
first reveal, and we've finally played varying amounts of it. I have probably played 5 hours of Deathloop already. I don't know where you guys sit, but who wants to steal the ball out from under me and give their impressions first from a high level?
Tucker.
Oh,
Oh,
yes,
okay. Oh, all
perfect.
right. I didn't realize
Well
that I
done,
was
Tucker.
being
Go for
passed
it.
the ball here. I started Deathloop yesterday, believe it or not, on the day that the game released.
That would make
And
sense.
it had been a while since I played a brand new big AAA exciting game like this. And being thrown into it, this feels pretty different from other big AAA games because, especially Bethesda ones, because there's not a lot of story cutscene at the beginning. You're not thrown into being introduced to a ton of characters at the start. You're introduced through a lot of gameplay tutorial with the characters talking and you Colt trying to figure himself out. And I think that's really interesting, and it's gotten me pretty interested to want to explore from that regard because it is a very different format for a story on this kind of scale. And I'm not quite engrossed in the gameplay yet, but I'm also only an hour and a half, hour 45 in. So I definitely recognize there's a lot more mechanics and exploration and understanding that I'll be able to write my head around initially. But my first impressions are definitely positive, though they're not as glowing as everyone else. Not necessarily because there's anything wrong with the game, just because I haven't quite gotten my hooks into it yet.
Yeah,
Tanner?
I'd have to agree with both of you there. I'm at on pace with Tucker. I'm about an hour and a half in. And yeah, like I said, like he said, impressions are positive. It doesn't quite have its hooks in me yet. I think what
Look at
this game
you, Mr.
does,
Parrot. Have,
yes,
have an original thought for once, huh?
well has this for an original thought because the formatting is interesting. Like Tucker said, it doesn't open you up, you don't wake up on the back of a cart and with a stranger who says you're finally awake, and then you get a lot of cutscenes. You're thrown right into the gameplay of it. And what it does to introduce you to the world is basically give you a bunch of pop-up screens to build out the lore and the mechanics and everything. And that, for me personally, was a lot to throw at you because it introduces you to the story concept, introduces you to like the slabs and the whatever the thing on your arm is. What is that called?
That is one of the slabs.
Yeah, that's just
Oh,
fine. There's trinkets as well,
Yeah, that's what, yeah,
trinkets.
yes,
yeah.
Thank you. I'm
and
thinking of
guns.
the
Believe it or not.
and guns in the game. That seems a little too violent for me, quite personally. Uh, little fun story. I actually missed the gun on my first playthrough. The
Yes,
when you wake up on the beach, the Tucker was watching. He's like, "You missed a gun. You missed like the first gun." I'm like, "Oh, what?"
yeah,
So
and we have no idea what would have happened if he
I
didn't
have
grab the gun.
no.
Sure.
I would have just gone into an action sequence with no gun. um, but yeah, I think it threw a lot at me.
Yeah.
Right up top. And that may be a little give me a little aversion to it maybe. But like I said, still overall positive.
Yeah, Tanner, I agree with you completely. I think the game has an onboarding issue. I think they're in the absence of a more traditional narrative because the game obviously breaks a traditional gameplay structure by merit of time loop and everything.
Yeah,
I don't think they really found an elegant solution for giving you information. Once once you guys get past where I'm assuming you kind of are based on your playtime, the game opens up a whole hell of a lot more, and they do a lot more. Here's some texts pop-ups and some menus to get through, and then once you do play for those couple hours, it becomes pretty intuitive how to move through the game.
sure.
But there's definitely a hump you have to get over to get into that experience for sure.
Yeah, the tracking leads thing is something I didn't bring up
Yeah,
because I did not remember it while I was talking. But yeah, the tracking leads thing, I'm like, okay, so this is the main quest, but then there's also like informational things that you can pick up,
yeah,
documents you pick up that give you the side quest essentially, but they
Mhm.
don't put those standard labels on it, which is why it might have been a little confusing for me.
Yeah,
sure.
there's definitely a lot of menu in this game that
Hmm.
it feels a kind of disconnected because a lot of this game is built around the tone and aesthetic and visuals and concepts of this world. But for me, it feels a little bit jarring. It's gameplay wise, it's not a huge problem. But when you are in between loops and he's in his workshops, like, okay, well, canonically, where does this fit in time? Does he have a mental thing that he goes into? He's like dancing around when you finish a loop or whatever. I'm like, what the fuck is
that's
happening?
weird.
But that's not a huge complaint. I'm just a little bit taken aback by it because the rest of the game is so coherent in the gameplay and the story being very married together. There is a time loop here, and when you die 3 times because you have the revive thing, that's because you have this thing and because there's a time loop. So I really like that. And the one thing I'm curious about to see the game as the game progresses is if there really is that breaking of structure, as you were saying, Abram, because while this time loops aren't tackled often in video games, especially not to this scale, I don't really quite feel yet like the time loop is actually that changing the gameplay structure that much, because it's when you die 2 times, you have to restart the level and all the enemies start back at their position. That's not a new concept. That's how level-based video games work. And when you start a new loop, enemies are in the same places. So I can't quite tell how the loop mechanic is changing things yet, except for the story.
Well, I think you're just speaking from a position where you haven't seen that in action yet,
Sure,
because being about 5 hours in, I have killed 3 visionaries. Of course, that's not a great metric because you have to kill them all in one day to beat the game, right? But the point is, I've followed enough leads to have found and killed 3 visionaries. And in doing so, you start to realize why the loop is important.
Who are basically the 8 Mega Man bosses, by the way.
Pretty much, sure. That's
you
actually
kill them and get their powers.
That's a really great point, actually. But you start to recognize the ways that, okay, I'm gaining information against this lead, and so then I need to return to this area at this time of day, because I know that they are going to be here together. So I'm currently tracking down a lead. I went through a loop in Updam, and I ended up getting a photograph, and the photograph showed 2 of the visionaries together in Frystad. So I went to Frystad, but it was already nighttime, and by then they've already left. So now I have to come back the next day, and if I'm there in the afternoon, they're going to be there together, and then I can kill them. And because I've gone through Frystad a couple times, I know my route, I know where the enemies are, so that's important.
Sure, yeah.
And as the loop resets and you start to learn about infusing weapons so you can have them for later runs and such, you start to realize, okay, I have to be very judicious. I'm basically gonna be able to go through this loop in like 4 parts of the day. During that, I need to collect enough residium to take this weapon, right, and infuse that, or this slab and infuse it. But then when the next day starts, okay, I only had enough to infuse the slab, not the weapon. But I know where I can find that weapon because I've gone through this loop and I know how many guards are there, so I can breeze past them, get my spiker and move forward.
I think what I'm realizing, and Tanner and I are on the exact same page here, is neither of us have actually completed a loop. We've never completed a day. I totally forgot that the loop is the 4-day parts.
Yes.
And then everything actually restarts.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, neither of us actually experienced that yet. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts. And of course, these are just our first impressions. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up, but I guess my question was null because I was just not informed.
Well, despite that, us not taking it or experiencing that element of the gameplay, there is some more base elements of the gameplay that I kind of take slight issue with. I think the gun switching thing is a little clumsy. Like I find myself like, okay, so there's a little command at the bottom, so I can press triangle, but if I want to dual wield, I have to switch over to the left. Directional buttons to switch over to a gun that way, but then I have to get my hack-a-majig over there. I think it feels slow for me right now. I don't know if that's a me thing or a game thing. Do you guys also experience that or not?
Well, I think the thing about Deathloop is that this is, as it would be referred to, an immersive sim. It's not an action game. It shares a lot more DNA with a Prey or a Dishonored coming from Arcane or other things of that ilk than it does a Doom, even though the combat is pretty snappy in action. I spend most of my time in stealth. But I think that there are things like that deliberately designed into the game to kind of force you to be meticulous about the way you're approaching situations. And what I like about the game is that in spite of
Tanner,
that, that
Tanner
I'm
doesn't
a
like that.
I'm very much a run and gun
sure,
sort of
sure,
gamer, and every single game that like has this, you can play however you want. They always say you can run and gun, but not every game can nail the mechanics of that. Like a Doom, like you said.
sure. But I think Deathloop does a nice job straddling both because
Yeah.
I play something like a Hitman or a Metal Gear Solid, and if you break stealth, you're fucked.
Yes,
Either you're
absolutely.
killing everybody or you're dying, but you're not getting back into stealth. I think Deathloop does a nice job allowing you to jump between those styles. I do think that the combat does feel good enough on a mechanical level that if you're just saying fuck it, you're it's becoming the first person shooter for a couple minutes, that does feel good. And especially when
Yeah.
you start getting your slab powers and you're
Sure.
using Nexus to link people together and killing them with a single headshot and such, that does feel really good. And I think that makes the gameplay feel really dynamic in a way that I was concerned that it wasn't going to.
Hmm.
My one central issue with the game right now is that the AI is dumb as a bag of bricks. This
Yeah.
is my biggest problem with the game.
Yeah,
Ha-
they give you a little prompt when they're talking about stealth that the people of what's it called, Black Reef, Black Reef didn't hire the brightest bulbs in the drawer.
Right.
So if you hide away from them for a little bit, which is something you've done in plenty
Yes.
of video games where you gotta wait for the little bar to go down over their head, they'll forget about you. But they really forget about you in this game.
Yes, and I think that's both to the game's benefit and to its detriment. I think the ability to kind of fluidly move between gameplay styles is great, and I think that's a good design
Sure.
decision. What I think is not a great design decision is when I've got a guy who's standing over here, and I'm just walking up behind him all the way to here, and I can just assassinate him.
Yeah.
Or I've got three guys coming slowly towards me, and I can hit 1, 2, 3 silenced headshots, and none of them are going to be the wiser.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that deflates the moment to moment experience just a little bit.
Sure.
The reason it doesn't completely undercut the experience the way it would in something like a Hitman, right, which is really predicated on the success of its AI, is the fact that this is a game that is really fast paced, actually, when you're really moving through it. And it's about that macro of planning out your loop and what you're trying to do and getting to the objective, finding the visionary, finding new weapons, finding the residium, right? And so the combat feels good, and the stealth and combat are a way to facilitate that. And to that effect, I think it's satisfying. The nail gun is my favorite weapon in the entire game.
Oh yeah, when I found that's
Yes.
great. That's a great fucking thing.
Nail gun to nail gun, headshot to headshot. It feels good, right? And I think that stops the issues with the AI from really being a detriment. But I find it peculiar that I can't like raise the difficulty or something. I was looking through the menus to see if I can kick this up to hard or something, just so it pushes back on me a little bit. Because all of my deaths have been me being fucking dumb, opposed to the game really being mechanically challenging.
Yeah.
So that's the one place where I think Deathloop is faltering for me right now.
Yeah.
No alternate save files for this game as well. An issue that we discovered in our long and hairy journey to try and play this game together. You have one save file for this game.
What I found is that was entirely deliberate, and they put a lot of thought into
Mhm.
that. And it's just because if you want to try something new, you just start a new loop. Like there's there's no
true.
reason really to start a new save.
Yeah.
Though I always appreciate there to be at least the option if you want to start from square zero, because I have a weird connection to starting games from the beginning, and just playing the first few levels, because I often find myself enjoying the opening sections of games quite a lot. And not this doesn't necessarily fall into that camp, but it would have been nice to have multiple save files, but I wouldn't say it's an issue because they clearly did consider that in terms of the game's design.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it would need to be this way, or else you can basically save scum your way into whatever events you need. It's okay, I'm going to run through this day. I'm going to make my alternate save at the beginning of the day. I'm going to finish out the day to get the info. I'm going to reset for my save and just go where I need to go and kill the visionary. I think that the way we were trying to use alternate save files was not intended by the game's design. So
I choose to believe that Sony altered their game sharing mechanics for their system after they watched our Marvel game reaction, where we even said in Roblox allegedly
Right.
parody
Great point.
that we don't do that. So Sony,
Right.
I'm not sure why you handicapped us like that. It's really an uncouth move, in my opinion.
Damn.
Speaking of Sony sort of acting uncouthly, I did get one freeze in my first hour and a half. But yeah, but my PS4 is always PS5 has always had issues with new games. Although that might not be fair because the last new game I played as soon as it came out was Cyberpunk. So
Sure. I think that speaks to the increasingly apparent fact that the quality control from PS5 unit to PS5 unit is fucking wildly variable.
yeah,
Because in my experience, I've had zero issues, but it really does seem like with every game that comes out, Ratchet, Returnal, Deathloop, there is a subsect of PS5s that simply do not play the game amicably.
yeah.
And so that seems like it is more on Sony's not super high quality control for hardware opposed to software. But maybe that'll change as I play more and I experience technical issues, but it has been flawless so far.
Yeah, I haven't had any issues either.
The last thing I want to talk about before
So you're
we
wrong,
get
basically, Tanner.
Yeah, well, that's weird because it must be only my profile because Tucker never has the issues that I have.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the hardware of these
Yeah.
machines. There's clearly something going wrong though. But the last thing I want to touch on before we get the fuck out of here is just the world of Deathloop itself.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was talking about all these gameplay mechanics and things like that. I'm like,
Boo!
but the one thing I really want to talk about is the color of this game and the ways that all the building layouts look and everything's got this really nice angular style to it. And you got these poppy posters on the wall and
Yes.
graffiti everywhere. And oh man, I'm so excited to really get into this game's lore and explore the worlds and get my head around Arcane, who's great at this, their map design, because
Great map
I'm
design.
I'm so in love with the aesthetic that this game
Mhm.
has in terms of just bringing in retro style things and random holes in the walls and weird lights on the ceilings and stuff. I think it's phenomenal. That's probably my biggest plus of the game so far. I have no issues with the aesthetic. I think it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. I love that 60s art pop, 60s,
Yes.
70s art pop thing it's going for. You know, even like the decrepit cars on the street are period accurate, and you know, it's got that, you know, that period infused with like future sci-fi technology, but it's of the era.
Yeah.
So it's future sci-fi, so it's still like predicated in that analog sort of era. It's all very cool.
Yeah, the retro future aesthetic is something I really love. And of course, the 60s here is so interesting to it. It's almost that Fallout thing of let's take the 50s and put it in the post-apocalypse.
Yeah.
Here it's let's take the 60s and put it in just
Whatever the fuck.
fucking debauchery.
Yeah.
and that's really cool. I love the partying, I love the excess, I love everybody. I love the crazy like party get-ups that
Yeah,
the
the costumes, yeah.
Eternalists wear. All of
Mhm.
that is so cool. And of course, there's really excellent world building here. And I'm so super excited to learn more about it. I will say a little bit too much of it for my tastes is told through text.
Hmm.
You'll have to, as you'll see when you get a little bit deeper in the game, you'll have to hack into a lot of visionary
Terminals,
computers to get information out of them, which is not the way I prefer to take in my video game storytelling. But one thing they do a lot of, which is they have audio logs, but the audio logs play over your gameplay.
Yeah.
So you can just
Beautiful.
listen to them as you're going throughout the world, which is great. But yes, a beautiful art direction. I think this game is stunning. And then there's great like out of world elements too. So Colt's text as he's talking to
Yeah.
himself is so fun. I've got a gun that says bang on one side and pow on the other, right? It's just
Mhm.
it's so stylish in a way that feels cohesive and interesting. And even the extra diegetic elements feel right at home.
Yeah.
I really think this game is very good. I haven't wanted to play anything else since I started playing Deathloop. I haven't wanted to do anything else other than play Deathloop, which is how I think I managed to fit 5 hours amongst two classes in the lab and a meeting and all kinds of shit yesterday, and
Yeah.
intend to do the same today. So I think
Mhm.
this game is really great.
And I think all of this is tied together with the final thing we mentioned is the voice acting is phenomenal. I love both Colt and Juliana and the way that her voice comes out of your controller and she's just like slinging shit at you and you're like, what? The Colt has no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
At the point of the game that I'm at, I think it's hilarious and both of them do an excellent job and they're both just really interesting characters and there is a history there and a connection to the world from both their angles that I'm very interested to dig into more. Especially
Absolutely.
because their voice acting is handled so well that you really are engaged with the characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about it. We will be back in some permutation of the boys, depending on who finishes the game for a review. We said the same thing about Resident Evil 7 or 8, whatever the hell, and the Village review certainly didn't happen. But
It was good. I like that game.
Yeah, we both finished it.
I fell off after the baby. I don't even remember what
Let's
the baby's name was.
Let's go.
On that note, we're going to get out of here. We got plenty more great content coming this week, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And we'll have a Deathloop review sometime. You got to stay tuned and find out when.
Bye.
Bye. Who's going to do the intro? I will.
Not
Thanks.
I.
By democratic decision, I've decided to do the intro.
Go for it.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Backlog Banter.